What would you value in life? Maybe it would change all of our outlooks. So what happened? What happened? Well, let me just give you a little bit of a background. It was about 200 years ago that education was designed, and it was designed for an industrialized society, which means really that they wanted people to be linear thinkers, to do what they needed to do and not ask questions, not be creative, because that would suit the society at that moment. But of course, you and I know that when we look into the future, we need children who are going to be imaginative, who are going to be creative, and to solve some of the problems that you and I and generations before us have created. So creative genius is something to be desired, and it's something that I'll explain to you that the brain really does enjoy. And by the end of this session, your brain and my brain will never be the same again. And that will be scientifically proven. So the other day, I heard of a 4-year-old who had just got a wonderful trampoline in his garden. And he said to his mum, let's go out and let me try the trampoline for the first time. And then he turned to his mother and he said, but if you could just watch out for airplanes overhead in case I hit my head. His capacity for imagination and creativity was endless. And the thing is, play and cognition are inextricably bound together. So if you imagine this is creativity, and if you imagine that this is cognition, intellectual development, and inside the brain, they are bound together. They cannot and must not be pulled apart, because we really have a problem if we try and pull this apart. And this is something that is not beyond the understanding of families that I come into contact with. They go, Jacqueline, tell me more. Tell me about the brain that loves to play, and they value it. And I learnt to value this myself when my son was about 7 years of age. He said to me, Mum, please, could you just test me on my spelling test? I need to know. And he said, oh, but please don't test me until I've forgotten. And I thought, oh, the education system. What is he feeling about learning? So when children in their minds have play and cognition intricately bound together, they make remarkable progress. So I'm going to draw on work that I've conducted with medical GPs, doctors, and scientists, with different companies like Sony, Fisher-Price. I've had a wonderful life researching into the brains of children, my own doctoral work, and I work on children's TV shows as well. And they have me in there to make sure that children have the very best experience. So the shows I've worked on, I'm the person that comes in and goes, yes, let's do that. That's exciting for the child's brain. Don't do that, because that isn't applicable for children's brains. So TV is not going away, so we need to make it the very best that it can be. So at the Bright Start Institute, which is a charity that I'm chair of, we say something. We say this: if you change the beginning, you change the whole story. And that's so true. So we must start at the beginning. So when does brain development actually start? Well, it starts soon after conception. And within 3 weeks, what's called the neural groove begins to close and the three central parts of the brain begin to take formation. Then by the time the baby is born, we see all these neurons here, and there are about 128 billion neurons available. And that's about as many stars as there are in the Milky Way. That's phenomenal. And then at birth, the job of the brain, as you can see here, is to join up and to join up the dots. And by 14 years of age, we can see that begins to prune away and the most important parts begin to take action. So every thought and every action has a chemical or electrical reaction in the brain. And we say the neurons that fire together wire together, and that is absolutely true. So where does learning occur? Well, it occurs in the hippocampus, where memory and learning all occurs. Neurogenesis, why am I giving you that word? Neurogenesis is talking about the fact that brain development continues all the way through our lives. Do you know what happened this morning when you woke up? You were given 700 new neurons. 700. And neurons won't do anything unless they begin to connect up. So as we get older, it is our responsibility to remain playful, to remain curious, to remain the very best that we can be, because who we are influences the children that we're with. So when you're visiting these families and the way that our brains behave influences the brains of others. And I'm going to be telling you more about that as well. Let's just see what it looks like when a neuron begins to connect. So you're actually going to look now under the hood and see a neuron connecting. Take a look at this. And there it goes. Neurons that fire together, wire together. And that pruning that happens, meaning taking away what isn't needed and moving into that space is hugely important. Now, the brain is an expensive organ. It gobbles up many of the calories that we consume every day. And it spends a lot of its time predicting. It is a predicting organ. So if I said to you something like, Mary, Mary, quite, and then you're likely to say contrary. Or if I said twinkle, twinkle, and you're likely to predict little star. So the brain is predicting where to put its energy, what's worth it in terms of survival. And the brain has a secret. It knows that the best efforts, the best place to engage all of its use is through play. It knows that the body budget is well delivered when anything is delivered through play. It makes it easier to consume. And you'll see that I have lots of Christmas decorations with me because I like props. It helps me understand. And this is your DNA. And we used to think that DNA was set in stone, that we could not change, and that also that you were never given any more neurons. Well, I've just exploded that myth. You're given 700 every day. It is not set in stone. It is able to change. And the more flexible and creative that we can be as adults, and how parents can be aware of how to light up their own brains, will affect children's brains as well. And if we have that understanding, we're able to be much more fluid in the way that we behave. Let me give you an example. Here's a photograph that I took. And as you're looking at this, your brain is working very, very hard to understand this picture. Now you're likely to be thinking, well, she's been talking about brain science, so maybe it's an MRI scan, or maybe it's something to do with a lab, or maybe it's a chemical. Whereas in fact, what it really is a bottle, because your brain then gobbled up lots and lots of calories trying to work it out. And through play, it is an efficient way to learn, because remember I said learning, play, and cognition are inextricably linked together. It's powerful when we know what the brain can do. Now, let me show you this little video of a baby who was terribly ill right from birth, and his mother decided that she really wanted him to have as much human interaction as possible. She was enthusiastic. She was creative in her approach. She wanted him to engage, despite the fact that he had lots of medical complications. And then in this video, you see the little baby being introduced to his next door neighbor. Note his responses. This is called serve and return. Just watch the human interaction.
No, because it hurts. Yes, it hurts. You cry. And mommy said, what happened? And papi said, why what are you doing? You crying and crying. Yes, don't eat. No. The Alfred, no. Mommy, give it food. Mommy, give it food. Oh, really? Oh, ¿a poco? You so liar. Yes, I know you. You so liar. Yes. You alarm the people, but you okay. Yes. Yes. Uh-huh. 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 What happened? Are you eat your Alfred?
Now, I've seen that video hundreds of times, and every time it evokes in me the understanding yet again of how that baby values human interaction, and how that baby's brain is designed to be playful, designed to connect. And as she was talking and leaving space, that serve and return, very much like a game of tennis, allowed the baby to have a voice and allowed the baby's brain to develop. Now, the interesting thing is 1 million new neural connections are made every second. I'm going to say that again, because I should think you'll fall off your seat when you realize this. 1 million new neural connections are made every second. And we need to enjoy and luxuriate in every moment with children, because their brains are soaking up exactly what they need through playful interaction. Now, on the left here is an image of a mother and a baby inside an fMRI scan. And she was a researcher, and she just wanted to cuddle and kiss her own baby. And something remarkable came about as a result of this. As she kissed her baby, you can see the same parts lighting up in the brain. Now, do you remember I said that your brain will be changed as we're talking, and my brain is being changed? As humans, we influence the very chemical and electrical structure and architecture of each other's brains. This is phenomenal and puts in perspective exactly how we need to encourage families to engage in a playful way with children. And on the right, you can see that eye-to-eye contact. There is a massive burst of exuberance in the brain of the baby when they're born. People often say to me, Jacqueline, you're always full of exuberance, particularly when you're talking about brain development. And I feel I'm very much like a baby because I see the awe and wonder in the world. And I think we all need to value this exuberance that is really contained deep within our brains to be playful. So when I worked with Fisher-Price, and this was a great honor to do this work with them, they said, Jacqueline, could you find out for us what happens when carers, parents, play with young children, not necessarily with a toy, it could be an object, it could even be an abstract thought. What happens to make it so special? We all know that something is going on, but what is going on in the brain? And it's something called reciprocal responsiveness, which simply means that something happens for the adult or the child, if it's an older child, something happens for the baby or young child, and there is this two-way conversation going on. And it is totally remarkable. Let me put it in another way. A brain network is shared. So that's supported by what's called the oxytocin system, which is simply the chemical and electrical signals within the brain. Let's think of it another way. Let's think of it as, here's my piece of bubble here. This is your brain. And as I'm talking, this is my brain. And as we're communicating, actually, it's a bit one-sided because I'm doing all the talking, but we begin to have a shared brain network that is scientifically shown. Because if this was an adult and this was a child, the parent and the carer and the child configure each other's body and brain. This is remarkable, remarkable. And when we understand this, we begin to see brain development as a piece of gold and play as the added fairy dust on top. And it's something that we really do need to think, wow, and every day be blown away by the capacity of the young child's brain. And I coined it this, I gave it a title. I call it playful triangulation. Let's see it here. Here we have eye gaze by this older brother See, it could be it could be an older sibling, or it could be an adult. And here's the child, the younger child, and this is what they're playing with. There are three elements. One is eye gaze. Something wonderful goes on between parents and carers and a baby and a child when they're looking at each other. And then when it's shared attention, there is as much attention given by the adult or older child as well as the younger child, supported by proximity. And then it becomes a triangle. And when you're working with children or you're working with families, you'll notice that that's in the middle of this triangle is where the magic happens within the brain. Eye gaze, shared attention, you're as invested in the activity, whatever it is, and you're in close proximity. Let's see this in action. So I set up an experiment, and it's called the still face experiment that I've replicated. And I said to Dad, first of all, be very playful, lots of eye gaze. The activity was bouncing up and down, and then stop all activity. Just keep still. Let's see what happens.
China, China.
You see how little Jonah becomes slightly troubled. He starts to reach out to touch Dad's mouth as if to say, hey, we were playing a game. I had the eye gaze. I had the close proximity. I had the shared attention. I had that playful triangulation. And now it's gone. Where's it all gone? It shows the power of human interaction. And let's see what's going on a little bit more in the brain. So we all know, and we've often heard people say that the brain is like a sponge. And that's absolutely true. It's true of little children, and it's also true of us as well. And of course, we didn't know this about 20 years ago. We thought our brains stopped developing. But now you know you've got your 700 new neurons every day. There's no excuse. So it's like a sponge, and it's soaking it up. It also, round here, and this is called the neurobiology of imagination. And this is the brain stem, which has a lot to do with body functions. And this is the prefrontal cortex, which is to do with decision making and making informed decisions about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it, and resilience. There's different parts of the brain to do with the limbic system. But the important thing to understand about the brain is that it loves to play. And this is the moment that when I discovered this, I was never the same again. I found that imagination actually turns genes on or off at a cellular level. which then cascades all the way through the brain and the body and actually changes the architecture of the brain. I'm going to say that again because it's so powerful. So inside the nerve cells, so imagination turns genes on or off inside the nerve cells, which then changes the actual architecture of the brain. Now, who was it that said imagination is more important than knowledge? It was Einstein. And Einstein was the most intelligent man that ever lived. And he knew a thing or two about knowledge. And he said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Let me prove this to you. Okay, so a researcher called Pascal Leon devised some research, and he thought, okay, I'll have a group of people who are going to practice playing the piano for 5 days. And he had one group of people practicing the piano every day. Then he had another group of people who were just thinking, imagining that they were playing the piano every day. Then he had a control group who did neither one nor the other. As expected, with the control group, when they put on the brain scan, nothing happened. But take a look at this. Take a look at the similarity between the group of people who actually did the physical piano practice and those that did it only through imagination. Phenomenal. So imagination is more important than knowledge. So as we encourage our families to play with children, we can, and particularly in an imaginative way, we are preparing them for future learning. Is there something called play poverty? Absolutely, yes. Any sustained deviation from the masterful plan of play comes at a price, and the price is in later life. Now, I had a friend who was a genius. In fact, he helped build the first fMRI scan, off the scale clever, and he and I worked together. All was fine until usually in the afternoon, he'd say, Jacqueline, I've just got to get outside and I've got to go and fly my kite. And I think, what, flying kites? I thought we were working on some research. But no, what had happened in his childhood was that his parents were so ambitious for him. They made him study every day and allowed him no imaginative play and no playtime. It lasts for a lifetime if we don't allow children to play in a way that they absolutely need to play. So I was then later on in my career asked to work on the most amazing social experiment, which was to go into 2 very deprived schools where children seriously lived in very deprived conditions. Absenteeism was rife. Parents didn't want to send their children to school. The school was actually failing. And I was asked to go in with a performance artist and a visual artist and a medical doctor, and the whole school team and I changed the curriculum up into a creative experience. So learning continued, but it continued in a creative manner, and the most extraordinary things happened. And from it, we identified 10 E's of creativity, which you can actually visually see. And I'm going to show you a film in a moment where you'll be able to see it. The children were enthusiastic, they were excited, they had happiness and joy and flow and confidence. And more probably importantly to the educational establishment, when they took exams, their results went through the roof. Creativity promoted their ability to do well in their exams. And everyone wanted to come to school. The teachers wanted to come to school. The parents wanted their children to come to school. And the children wanted to come to school. Let's take a quick look at, and this is the medical doctor, looking at creativity from a creative point of view. The children are 6 years of age, and it just gives you a little snapshot.
We've been looking at creativity from some different points of view. Firstly, we're looking at creativity from the point of view of the body and the perspective of human health. We're looking at creativity from the perspective of neurophysiology, which is the way in which the brain and nervous system interact with creativity. What we and other researchers are seeing is that creativity has this beneficial effect in relationship to children's stress and to their physical, emotional, and mental well-being.
Here we're going to see an example of a child during the preparation, leap and landing stage. Here's Paige as she gathers together her materials. We can see the seriousness on her face, her quick, purposeful body movements indicating the surge of energy she feels about her project. She moves around the room, seeking out the materials she needs for her model. We can see the focused concentration, and she's scoring highly on the child involvement scale. Paige's relaxed body frame and mouth shows deep concentration and involvement at the start of this creative experience. Now she begins to enter the leap stage, where there are breakthroughs, realizations, ahas, revelations. Paige is normally quite pale and sometimes distracted, is now becoming focused and deliberate in her actions. Her greater skin profusion, the facial flushing, shows just how it alters her biological state. At this stage, for the landing, where an enormous amount of energy is released, Paige wishes to share with her friend and with her teacher, celebrating her success. The human nervous system seems to reward itself for gaining that deeper understanding of reality.
We've been looking at
And where does that all occur in the brain? Let me show you. So there's the delta waves. I'm sure you've heard of these: theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. Now, creativity, when you saw Paige playing and learning in a creative manner, it's this central part here. It's within the alpha waves. And what happens within the alpha waves, it's as though we become unfocused. And you'd say, oh, isn't that a bad thing to be unfocused? Well, actually not. It allows the brain to think out of the box, to literally see the bigger picture. And it inhibits habitual thinking. In other words, by being relaxed, by being creative, by being imaginative, we can see just how the brain enjoys the play. And it's very good for cognition and for future learning. It's phenomenal, the sorts of things that children say. In fact, I heard of, I think it was about 3.5. Mum said, you're going to go to preschool for the first time today. And, oh, unfortunately, I'm too big for preschool and Daddy's too big for preschool. And he said, okay. And he went into preschool at the end of the day, rushed to meet Mum and said, Mum, look, the ceilings aren't too low. You're not too big for preschool. Children will always see answers. Their creativity must be preserved. Now, you can certainly share this with families because they are observable changes. When children are in that creative flow, which is very good for the brain, you can see the general behavior, the affection, the exuberance, and also, did you notice the sharing and showing of others? When children are within that creative flow, imaginative space, their physiology and actually changes in terms of heart rate variability and EEG changes, precision in fine movements and that forward posture and direct gaze and focus. They are in a heightened sense and in a heightened place in order to learn. It's fascinating. And once you've seen it, you'll never forget it. And it's something you can share with others. You can say, look out for these particular facial expressions which show that children are in a readiness, a place of readiness in order to learn. And when we're talking about focus, when babies are first born, they have what's called a lantern focus, like this. They're taking in a lot. And that's one of the reasons that babies are born unfinished, if you like, so that they're able to kind of spread their thinking and decipher their environment. And it's not until later on that they get what's called a spotlight attention. And what we need to understand is that as the baby comes into the world unfinished, it is for a very, very good reason. It is for that playful triangulation to occur. Let's see a frog appearing and children's opinion about what this frog might be doing. Listen in. Let's just eavesdrop in on their conversation.
Oh, I found. It's one of our frogs. Maybe it's one of the frogs that we had last year. That was a tadpole. Oh, it goes up like a frog. Exactly. And before it becomes a frog, it's a tadpole, and then it's a froglet. Well done. Yes, a froglet. And then after it's a froglet, it becomes a ginormous frog. I got one there.
That must be one of our frogs because I don't think a different frog would come to us if it wasn't ours.
That makes a lot of sense.
But remember when we found one next to the shed?
Sorry? Well, Dexter is saying something very important. Yes, Dexter?
There might be a squirrel at my house.
Oh, I see.
There might be a frog.
Uh-huh.
This frog is different.
This frog is different.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Is it moving again?
Moving.
Yes.
Quiet for a second. You know what I think? I think it came in this pool because a bird was chasing it.
It's amazing. And do you know what? Something I've learned. Every time I have an idea, I jump. Because apparently that's the best way to do it. The children were so involved in the appearance of the frog. They had their own ideas. They were listened to. And the adults were as invested in the situation as the children, creating that wonderful, playful triangulation. The other important aspect is that the senses were involved, and the brain loves new sights, it loves new tastes, it loves new texture, and it relishes in that. Now, when the senses come in, ideas collide. And this is the beauty of what the brain's doing. It's chucking around loads of ideas and thoughts within what's called the association cortex. And out of that, now you're going to be surprised I'm going to say this, is chaos. Well, surely, Jacqueline, that's a bad thing. No, it's not. Out of that chaos comes fresh understanding, new insights, enthusiasm to learn. And then comes the calm, the peaceful resolution of new ideas. So, solutions. Children literally begin to see the bigger picture because of the way that the brain is designed to play. Play and brain growth are happy companions on the journey of life. A little girl, I think she was about 6, I can't remember, I heard her mum tell me this. I mean, in fact, no, I was eavesdropping. She was telling somebody else. And she said her little girl wanted a cat. And she'd been saying, Mum, I really want a cat. Please, can I have a cat? Please, can I have a cat? And in the end, Mum said, look, I'm sorry. I really can't have a cat because I have allergies. So I couldn't have a cat in the house. And she said, never mind. You can sleep outside. It did make me laugh. Children will come up with amazing solutions. I think we'll leave this one out, but I just need to tell you a little bit about, and here's the word of the day, psychoneuroimmunology. All that means is how can we prevent ourselves and families from getting overstressed? Well, the antidote to stress is play. And I think about it as dose. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins are released when children play and when you have this beautiful, playful triangle. It engages their brain and bodies in a way that prevents and buffers them. Now, when I go running, which I don't do very often, but if I do, then I always wear trainers because I have to make sure that my knees don't get damaged. And play is very much like that. It's like a buffer for running through life's obstacles. It helps protect us. It helps protect our brains and our bodies as well. So, what are the biological opposites? When children are in a creative, imaginative state, let's see what goes on, as opposed to when you or I, adults or children, are in a stressed state. We can easily divide it. So, when children are creative, we saw more alpha brain waves. We say relaxation, less muscle tension. You see this kind of relaxed form. You also see greater parasympathetic activity. What does that mean? Well, when you get stressed, then you have the sympathetic part of action coming on board, and the parasympathetic aspect comes in to calm you down. And the parasympathetic action is activated through play, through creativity, through being in the moment, through being part of that playful triangulation. And you also have better long-term memory access, deeper breathing, greater fluency. Which side do we want children to be on? Our families to inhabit, both adults and children. We don't want them on this side where there's a kind of a change in breathing. There's the stress or distress. When adults are stressed, children become stressed. So everyone to use their new neurons every day is priceless. Let's take a look at humor. And this is actually what I'm working on. My next research is on humor. And I'm fascinated by how humor and laughter helps the parasympathetic nervous system be activated. Now, this child has COVID or had COVID when the film was taken, but watch his reaction to this, and I defy you not to laugh. He is activating his parasympathetic nervous system. We need to be ambitious for our families. We need to be ambitious for our children. And you know, the biggest risk in life is never taking a risk. And we want our children to avoid play poverty because it can last a lifetime. The brain that loves to play, how are you going to use your 700 new neurons today? How are you going to get them to connect up? How can we encourage families to be playful, to engage in creativity for the sake of children, for the sake of our shared brain networks, for the sake of society, and for my sake as well. Thank you. And here are some references as well. So I'm very happy to take any questions or comments or.
Jacqueline, thank you so much for that. That was so fascinating. So much information shared. What questions are coming up for you that, well, you have Jacqueline here to answer them. You can put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and just pop in and ask. I have a question about your friend who, your colleague who needed to go out and fly a kite. And how did he come to that after what sounds like a childhood of play poverty? How did he come to that realization that that was what he needed when he'd been socialized to not have those kinds of experiences?
Yeah, well, he realized that he had a deficit in the way that he communicated with other humans. He saw it for himself, and he realized that that play poverty, in fact, I think it was probably through, strangely enough, through some of the research that we were doing together. And he began to identify some of the detrimental effects, because actually we were, part of it was to do with play that we were talking about. And it came up for him where he realized that it was incredibly difficult to sustain attention on something for longer periods of time and be socially connected at the same time. He found that very difficult, but he found his solution because we know now that our brains are far more plastic. We have neuroplasticity. So he knew that his brain could change. And so when he'd gone and flown his kite and he came back, he was revitalized because his parasympathetic nervous system had stroked his brain and said, it's okay, you'll be all right. And he was able to continue. So he was able to look after himself. But it arose actually through some of the research we were doing, yes.
Interesting. Yeah, we've had a few questions over the last couple of days about, for instance, if a caregiver has not had their imaginative play or their dramatic play encouraged, how can they be open to doing that with their own children? And, you know, we've talked about modeling and the home visitor modeling for the parent and you know, just I think also following children's lead because they know how to play. If we follow them, we'll be playful too. But I just found it so interesting, and someone so very educated like that, you know, then he would be like, I need to go fly that kite.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also there is such a fascination about what's going on in the brain, where whenever I go and talk, I mean, obviously it's different over Zoom, but I usually get pinned to the wall and people say, how can I be more playful? Or what can I do with children to brighten up my own brain? And I think the understanding of what's going on under the hood is making us all much more responsive, I think, and much more understanding of the value. So I think it's not about turning us all into neuroscientists, but I think a little bit of understanding of science is beginning to change people's perception of the value of play and how it actually helps children learn. So I think talking about brain science doesn't mean, oh, no, we can't talk about that. It's something for really clever people to do. No, it's something that's accessible to everyone. And I think sometimes just giving that little bit of information, role modeling, following the lead of the child, all of that is important, but also helping people understand what's going on under the hood is really exciting.
It is. It's very exciting. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us and for doing it so beautifully today. We're just lucky to be able to have you here. But thank you, Jacqueline.
Enjoyed it immensely. Thanks so much. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Jacqueline? Oh man, it's okay. I'll catch her maybe if she joins us in our other sessions, but I had a question.
Okay. Are you? Oh, she's gone. Amparo, thank you so much for being here today. Yeah, it looks like not. And then you're gonna take the lead this afternoon for Amelia sub 3. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much. Bye.